I never want to criticize consultant industry at large.
Yeah.
It's more just the behaviors. And so let's go into the behaviors, the incentives, right? We were talking about over coffee, some of the misaligned incentives, especially around compensation. And I know we all have an opinion about that. But like you guys also had the advantage of starting 5 or 6 years ago and not starting 25 years ago, right? So it's easier to come in with a clean slate. But give me y'all's perspective on the way, kind of the proper alignment of compensation and structure and things like that. Yeah.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, I always want to make sure that I'm on the same side of the table as my client. We talked about earlier on, are fully insured, you know, if they get a 10 or 15% increase, essentially I'm getting a 10 to 15% bonus that year off of my inability to help them to control. And obviously some things are out of your control,
of course
but at no point should my client be watching, you know, basically them and not just the faceless employer, but a cost that's being passed on to the families of that employer. And I'm getting paid more because of that. And I think that you've done a good job of bringing that up with some of the past guests. And that just, like, ethically, morally, where Cliff and I come from in terms of how we, you know, treat people and how we want to be treated, that just wouldn't sit right. So, I mean, usually whenever clients say, well, how do you get paid? You know, I kind of turn it around a little bit and say, well, what makes you comfortable? What do you think is a fair value for how we do this? And we'll do either a flat fee, or sometimes what I've liked to do in the past too is, let's say we put a max fee on there. So it's not to go above certain amount, but if we do get commissions from whether it be stop loss or whatever it may be, it goes to the client to then be able to use for, let's say they need a call center, or let's say they need, you know, something else out there.
Yeah, there are certain products. I don't get big into ancillary and volunteer products, but there's some products where like commission is just in it. There's no way to deconstruct that. So I get that.
But does that commission then, you know, you can decide, does it go to me? Now I'm driving around a Maserati and you're like, wow, that was really, you know, nice for you. Or are we able to sink it back into your business?
Exactly.
And then you don't have to go ask for more budget, because that's the problem a lot of times is the HR folks are given, you know, 1 to 2 people for a giant company, have a not a huge portion of the budget, and are asked to take care of all the employees and do a million different things. And so we want to help them create more value with whatever budget they have. So if we can find creative ways to like repurpose some of those funds to be able to bring in a mental health program or something like that's top of mind for them, we're all ears on how to try and do that creatively.
Yeah, I want to get your opinion too. Oh yeah, did you finish your thought if you had something to it? Yeah.
This was something that was frankly a little disappointing coming into the industry is how the finances work within it. And we talked about this. One of my big things is I do not like fully insured plans as a general rule. And we've talked about
with you there. I mean,
Well,
on average,
podcast is called self-funded.
It's not fully insured. I've made that joke before.
You know, we said it, on average over time, you will save money and provide more value to your employees if you're self-funded. So why doesn't that make sense for most employers? I get it. There's going to be outliers and exceptions. I get that. But generally speaking, it makes a lot of sense for them. So that's, to answer your earlier question about market, that's the market segment I approach and I feel is a better fit for my personality, my internal drivers, sort of my skill set is to work on that transition from fully insured to self-funded. But again, what it serves to do is ideally align those incentives too.
Well, and I want to add on to that, because I think we talked about there's a way that you might even put some fees at risk, right? And you don't have to do exact amounts or anything, but you know, structurally or directionally, what do you mean when a fee might be at risk for performance or performance guarantees? What does that mean to you guys?
Yeah, so and this is my practice, what I'll do is I'll put 50% fee at risk.
Okay.
So what we'll do with a client is we'll identify KPIs to hold against for that
Cliff,
fee at
what
risk.
does KPI stand for?
Key performance indicators.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So
you're just throwing out all these acronyms, and it's very military of you. And everyone's like, excuse me? What did
we
you
agree.
say?
Thank you, Winston.
Yeah.
We agree on what those KPIs are and what the time frame for is, and then we review them. And it's very black and white. If we have not met the goals for those, then we do a tiered fee, you know, not payback because we can't rebate, but we'll then slide that money into an account that the employer can then use for whatever they want to use.
Yeah, so, but I think I want to make sure I clarify. The employer and you are sitting down together and saying, this is what I'm agreeing to be accountable.
I'm not in a vacuum saying, hey, I'm comfortable not getting paid if I don't do this. It's them saying, hey, this is what we expect. I agree that they're realistic. And we sit down and we say, okay, yes, that is what we will be held accountable to.
Well, how do y'all feel about the flip side? I'll come to you, Winston. How do you feel about the flip side of that, where some brokers will do a performance guarantee where there's additional monies to be earned whether through savings or better than expected performance. So like, how do you view that structure? Or is it more difficult to quantify?
Yeah, I mean, and that's what I'm going to give you a very consultant answer. It depends.
It depends.
And I think that everyone has their own, but as long as you're sitting across and you're both being from each other and you're being transparent about how you get paid, where it comes from, and then what you perceive the value to be, I would also flip the expectation to the client as well and say, hey, here are your expectations of me as your consultant, as your broker, but at the same time, here are my expectations of you, and not like, obviously I'm not telling Mike, hey, this is, I expect you, or I'm just going to cut you. But if we're going into a partnership, and we talked earlier, sometimes we'll be like, well, our benefits vendor, and I never like being called a vendor because it's just very transactional. We're partners in this, and we're partnering with you, but a partnership means mutual and equal trust. And so if we need to be sitting across from each other at the table and saying, this is what we're going to be doing together. And that's what I think that, to your point on the people strategy, and you were kind of talking about our specific kind of ways that we approach business. What I've seen, and I think what Cliff has seen as well, whether it be in business school, whether it be in consulting, is a lot of companies like to talk about their 3 to 5 year business strategy or financial strategy or whatever, but a lot of them aren't talking about their people strategy. How are you going to hire people? How are you going to retain people? How are you going to grow the next wave of leadership to help you achieve whatever your business and financial goals are?
You plan to move into a market. How are you going to support that growth?
How are you going to find? And people are like, well, we're going to hire the best people. Great. Awesome. How are you going to do that? And so it's like that second and third level question that I think is our job to ask, that again is maybe totally outside of healthcare. But it's saying, where do you want the business to be?
Even if it's just you have somebody that can help, like how valuable to a business if you go, oh, you're seeking to do that? I actually know a person.
Guy.
I know a person that can help. I'll make an introduction. You become more valuable to them as well. But those incentives, like I want on a probably last question here, but those incentives, the structure, I think the inverse of that, unfortunately, is like you said, where we get an increase to our revenue and that employer's paying more money. Like, and when you start to really understand and unpack it, we've talked about commissions and the stop loss and how that might actually make the employer pay even more money than you think. Like, I don't think people even think about that enough to go, well, wait a second. You are designing this strategy, but my costs are going up. You're making more money. I don't even think they make that connection most of the time until you point it out. And that's one of those just broad-based behaviors that I think just casting a light on. I'm not trying to demonize and say you were wrong and everybody that ever did this was bad. But if we all can agree that's a very hard way to argue for, if I explained it to you properly.
Well, we talked about this earlier. When it comes to just the general healthcare, when people think of the cost of healthcare, most people don't have good things to say about it, right?
Yeah, unfortunately.
And you're either part of the problem or you're part of the solution. And so I think there are folks, unfortunately, that can be, and again, not to demonize, but it's part of the industry, that are part of the problem, and they're kind of, when we talk about trimming the fat on some of these plans, they're kind of part of the reason that the fat is there. And so that's where hopefully Cliff and I can come in. I think a big part of what we do is educate, because to your point, people don't either A, know about, or B, want to talk about what their commissions are and stop loss, and they'd rather just kind of, hey, whatever makes sense to you guys, but they're putting that trust in you. So I feel like it's also our obligation trying to educate them on here's how this works, and y'all did a good job of here's how a dollar flows through and why that matters to you. I think that that's a huge part of what we do, because that's, to me, one, how you gain trust, but two, how you elevate the conversation. And we talked earlier, I try and lead whenever we're meeting with CFOs or business school buddies and things like that. People are like, oh, benefits and this squishy thing, and we're all just, having wellness fairs all the time and stuff like that. And it's important, but there's a lot more to it. But no, I'm talking about your second or third largest line item on your budget, on your P&L. If we're talking about 7-figure numbers and 6-figure savings or more, is that worth a conversation? And I think that's part of where that education piece comes in, because people are just like, oh, benefits is this fluffy thing. No, it's a huge deal. It's a huge spend.
Well, the way I look at it is, again, shine light on it, educate people. It's going to resonate with probably a lot of people once they connect. Some people it won't, and that's also okay, right? Then we just don't do business together. We don't work together. I'm perfectly fine with that.